The MMA is full of fighters whose bread and butter are submissions. We've got fighters who have mastered the art of choking out their opponents, tiring them out in the clinch, or even popping out and straight up breaking their opponent's arms and legs. We have tons of MMA fighters with wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu backgrounds who have perfected the art of the submission. But submissions come from all types of fighters. For today's video, we're looking at the rarest and most unexpected submissions in MMA history. Before we get to the meat of the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more videos on the coolest sports content. Conor McGregor vs. Dave Hill. As you can expect from the notorious Conor McGregor, he doesn't have a lot of wins by submission, preferring to throw punches and kicks and punches. In fact, McGregor has only one submission win in his career, but it was one heck of a submission though. Early in his career, back when he was completely bald and looked nothing like his infamous UFC self, Conor McGregor faced off against Dave Hill at Cage Warriors 47, fighting for the featherweight belt. Conor McGregor showed flashes of his future MMA dominance, absolutely wrecking Dave Hill with punches and even some grappling. Finally, in the final minute of the second round, McGregor gets Dave Hill in a nice choke from behind, which forces the MMA fighter to tap and gets McGregor the cage fighter's featherweight title in an astounding way. McGregor may have only had one submission, but it sure was one heck of a submission. Anderson Silva on Chael Sonnen. Anderson Silva is very much known as a premier knockout artist in the history of the UFC. With all his Ali-esque bobbing and weaving, very few could keep up with the spider's kicks and punches during his prime. In this matchup, Silva had been hinting he was going for a submission for Chael Sonnen even during pre-game pressers. While Silva definitely could submit, almost everyone knew his bread and butter was kicks and fast and powerful punches. During this fight with Chael Sonnen, as he defended his middleweight title for the 11th time, it wasn't looking good for the reigning champ. Silva looked vulnerable as Chael got on top and rained down punches from a dominant position on top. But Silva still very much was in control as he goes for a submission from that lower position and gets a perfect leg lock on Sonnen's neck and arm. Sonnen tried his all, but Silva was too dominant and he got an insane submission on Chael Sonnen. Silva might have been dominant in getting knockouts, but that didn't mean he couldn't go out and submit you too. Paddy Pimblett vs. Alexis Savitas. People may know Paddy Pimblett more so for his humble demeanor and comedic personality, but don't let that demeanor fool you. Pimblett is one heck of a fighter. Case in point of Pimblett's dominance is this epic win at Cage Warriors 90, going off the defensive master Alex Brickwall Savitas. Pimblett was on a mission this time as he wanted to prove himself after losing to Nad Narimani and losing his belt to a unanimous decision loss. Pimblett showed no rust as he fought hard and tough against Savitas. Paddy the Baddy made headlines and had his name in headlines after he decided to finish the fight in spectacular fashion. Well, against the cages as the second round ends, Paddy the Baddy jumps up and reverses his opponent for a perfect triangle hold on Savitas. Savitas with no choice and instead of risking a broken arm taps, and Paddy cements his name as a rising superstar in MMA with that dominant unexpected submission. Godofredo Pepe vs. Fili. During this featherweight main card at UFN 62, sparks flew as we saw some insanely dominant MMA fighting. Godofredo Pepe and Fili both went into the fight wanting to prove something. Fili had the reach and height advantage while also being the younger fighter, but Pepe came into the bout ready to battle. Pepe was in the cage and was not in good shape, as it seemed Fili had the dominant position. Pepe then uses the cage to jump and catches Fili by surprise with a triangle hold that brings Fili down to the ground. Fili gets his hands free and tries to get out of the hold, but Pepe was simply too dominant and his legs simply wouldn't give in. And that was how Pepe got this insane first-round submission that put his name on people's radars. Demetrious Johnson vs. Borg. Mighty Mouse has to be one of the most dominant MMA champions of all time. The guy was an all-around master, dropping crazy hits and grappling with the best of them. One of Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson's best finishes has to be this one from UFC 216. Going up against challenger Borg, history was on the line as Mighty Mouse was one win away from a UFC record for consecutive title defenses. Borg came to compete, however, and the first 2 rounds were arguably his, as she showed out with combos and power punches. Tides turned for the next few rounds, however, as Mighty Mouse began to show his dominance, and as they entered the 5th, all Borg could hope for was to maybe survive long enough to get a fluke win by submission. Mighty Mouse wasn't letting that happen, however, as he goes in for one of the most absurdly epic submissions we've ever seen. As Mighty Mouse goes for a flying suplex, but instead of just ending with a powerful body slam, he goes for the armbar as Borg falls down on the canvas. Borg struggled and kicked up trying to get out, but it was no use as Borg could simply get no leverage, and he was forced to go for the tap out. Just like that, Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson had made history in epic fashion. I've seen my fair share of Superman punches, flying kicks, and even flying knees, but nothing is quite as electric as a flying submission. Ryan Hall vs. BJ Penn. At UFC 232, one of the greatest lightweight MMA fighters of all time, BJ Penn, faced off against young up-and-comer Ryan Hall. Hall was ready to prove himself against a grizzled MMA legend. Ryan Hall immediately showed that he was an unorthodox fighter, as even with his back on the canvas, BJ Penn just couldn't dive in for a good strike on his opponent, as he knew Hall was just waiting for his opportunity to absolutely submit him. Then as the middle of round 1 came upon them, Hall makes his move. He dives in and gets underneath Penn. This move gets Penn in trouble as his leg is completely at the mercy of Ryan Hall. Within seconds, Penn knew he was not getting out, and instead, risking a broken leg, he taps out, and Hall gets the absolutely speedy and dominant submission win over an MMA legend like Penn. Hall proved he wasn't a joke or a fluke with that win, and he also showed submissions can be just as electric, or even sometimes more electric than a KO and TKO in MMA. Shinya Aoki standing armbar. Our pick for the most absurd and downright has to come from Japan's biggest bully, and Japanese MMA legend Shinya Aoki. Shinya Aoki was known for ending every fight he possibly could with a submission. The man can grapple with anyone and gave his opponents no breathing room when he latched on. Like a parasite, Shinya Aoki was grabbed on top of his opponents, choking the life out of him or ripping opponents' arms and legs with a signature submission-heavy style. Shinya Aoki was always expected to pull off a submission, and that's exactly what he did in this bout. At this fight in Shuto, Shinya Aoki faced off against Keith Wisniewski. Aoki had Wisniewski in hell and in the ropes as Wisniewski struggled and tried to shut out Aoki's offense. Aoki, however, found the weak spot and inside the clinch was able to perfectly grab Wisniewski's arm. You could argue from the initial grab, Wisniewski already had his arm popped off, but outside of that, the entire move was sudden and unexpected. And if that initial grab wasn't enough, the takedown was probably the dagger that completed this incredibly dangerous armbar from one of Japan's most infamous fighters. And that's all for today's video. What's your favorite unexpected submission? Write your answers down in the comments, and while you're at it, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications on the newest videos on the best sports content.